I won't go on longer than we need to, because I'm sure you're all going to be out disco dancing or whatever on a Friday night. I've just realised I started putting all the dates on for each show, and I only got to the first one. So we'll follow up with the precise dates later. So 2020's got some amazing things in the exhibition programme. We, as you know, when I came, one of the sort of key proposals was that we would broaden the programme to be more sort of embracing of modern and contemporary art, and indeed earlier art, as well as sort of maintaining our commitment to the 17th and 18th century British and European history of art. And I think you can really see that in the coming year's programme. We've also, of necessity, committed ourselves very wholeheartedly to a kind of programme that is driven by audience desire. So it's not populist, but it's intended to be popular, but still have a lot of integrity. And I think the first show of the year actually sort of really encapsulates that. Grayson Perry, the pre-therapy years. Now, I can't remember what show it is there. So this exhibition of the artist Grayson Perry. So Grayson Perry is a contemporary artist, as you probably know, who I think he's just turned 60, who emerged in the sort of secured his reputation in the 1980s and really became established kind of in the late 1990s, winning the Turner Prize in the early 2000s. Unusual as a contemporary artist for working primarily in ceramics, and also unusual for being a very prominent transvestite. As he says in his catalogue essay for our show, he opens it by saying, "I have a very distinct brand as the transvestite potter." And so, as you know, there have been a number of Grayson Perry exhibitions in recent years, not least at the Victoria Art Gallery a few years ago. But behind the thinking behind this show focuses on his early work, that is between about 1982 and 1994. Now we chose those dates because, firstly, I thought that everyone knows Grayson now through the works that have been travelling around the country, often relating to TV series that he's made about class and masculinity and so on. And a lot of that work had been tapestries that have been sort of made in factories to his designs and so on. And a lot of people who think they know Grayson don't know the early work that actually made his reputation primarily in the 1980s. And it seemed to me when I came here that we have this amazing museum, this extraordinary collection of ceramics, and a combination of fine and decorative arts, if those two separate things. And so looking at a fine artist who uses ceramic, and as a historical art museum looking at a contemporary artist with a historical perspective, is an entirely appropriate thing to do. So we're looking, it's actually a sort of research project, looking at early Grayson Perry's work, bringing together actually these things from the 80s and early 90s for the first time since they were shown at that time. So there's a lot of excitement around this exhibition. Grayson's an artist who really started making work as an art student, ceramic work in 1983, 4. He was initially making films, like a lot of young artists were at that time, wobbly kind of 8mm films in the sort of wake of Derek Jarman and others. And also produced, and some of those films will be in the show, and also made an extraordinary sort of collage sketchbooks, and some of those will be in the show. But the larger part of the show, which will include about 80 pieces, so this is going to be in the Roper and the Worth galleries, are ceramics, and it's a mix of about 60% vases and 40% plates, I think. And plates are a big part of his practice. This is a sort of typical piece of that time, typical partly because it's not very well made. He was a sort of, he learned pottery at evening classes in North London. All his works, pots are made, vases are made using the coil technique rather than being thrown on a wheel. And the plate, you can see this is a plate which sort of cracked in firing. It's a self-portrait. The fact that he's upside down is a little dig at the German artist George Baselitz, who was very hot in the 1980s, who started showing his works figurative, but always shown upside down. And so that's very typical of Grayson. He's always puncturing people's bubbles, and sort of the art world was one of them, one of his favourite targets. But if you read the text, so is he himself in that thing. So this is, I think, a quote from a review of his work, which says, amongst other things, he makes pretentiousness a virtue. He makes plots for trendies, who hate ceramics, turns self-awareness into a dirty word and breaks the taboo of being original. In his hand, irony and cynicism become as hackneyed as the expressive brushstroke, compromise and contradiction abound, a true 80s artist. So he's sort of mocking himself as he becomes a sort of successful artistic figure. There are certain themes that run through the work. There are a few sculptural pieces. This is it's not a very good photograph, but the proper photographs we have are so high res, they will sort of crash in the presentation. So I've used lots of research photographs which Catherine or I took in people's houses. This is a little throne about this size to Princess Diana, who of course at this time was being idolised all over the press. But as I say, a lot of plates, and there's a whole series of this using the same mould, but then with different imagery and text on it. Text is very important. They're called the commemorative plate series, and he's playing off those plates that you see in people's living rooms on the wall, commemorating royal weddings and so on. And what you see, and when I spoke to his gallerist, Victoria Miro, and said, look, we're thinking of just focusing on the early works. I don't quite know, where should we finish? And she said, well, 1994 is the year in which he had his first kind of proper art world exhibition. He's shown in small galleries in Chelsea and Soho, but in 1994 he showed with Anthony Doffey, who was the kind of top contemporary art dealer at the time. So then when we first met Grayson face to face and said, so we're thinking of doing this period, and he said, oh, the pre-therapy years. And I think it was a sort of glib comment, but we've taken it as a title because there's something really important in that Grayson and his sort of very famous public persona as Claire, his transvestite self, is very much a product of his therapy, psychotherapy. And what he's doing through these works is sort of working through his issues. And I would, if anyone wants to sort of really get into this, do read his autobiography, because it's a really extraordinary story. This is a genuinely kind of working class boy who gets thrown out of his home when his parents separate, and he's sort of unwelcome in both homes when they realise that he's developing as a teenager as a transvestite. And so he's sort of living in squats and looking for an identity, and finding it in a sort of strange convergence of a sort of fetishism and pottery. One of his earliest memories is doing pottery at school, for which they were given rubber aprons, and his was slightly too small. And feeling this sort of, the age of 8 or 9, a sort of kind of thrill from that experience. And it's sort of, it's quite funny, but it's also quite an important part of this. Because this is, and I think it's very important thinking about what we do at the Holborn and how we talk about art, that he is making art as a therapeutic process. And the messaging, which is sometimes crude in both senses, it's sometimes clumsy and sometimes rude, but it is also him trying to explore his identity and who he is, which is what he's been doing on TV, exploring different senses of masculinity. And one of the things that comes through the iconography of these pots is that on the one hand, hang on, I might need to coordinate this. Well, on the one hand, he's conscious of himself as a product of Essex, the sort of, I don't know, the stereotype of the, whatever the opposite of picturesque landscape is. So the Essex landscape is a feature of his work. That's another sort of ridicule in the art world. But also he has this fascination with Princess Di and newsreaders. This is a kind of Sue Lawley figure. So that's this period of Sue Lawley and Jan Leeming. Some of you would know who I'm talking about, but a lot of you do. Who he's fascinated by. And interestingly, his first kind of transvestite persona is like that. He's sort of twin set and pearls, sort of newsreader, Margaret Thatcher, Princess Di. Unlike the sort of little Bo Peep extravagant figure that he is now when he's in public. So he's very much using this work to explore his idea of masculinity. And on the one hand, he is starting to dress up as a female newsreader, but he's also a biker and going to bikers' cafes on the A1 and stuff like that. So he has this very complicated identity as a man. And then as the show progresses, so there's a kind of chronological structure within the 80-ish works that we've got from the early 80s, where it's probably more diverse. There are more sculptural figures, there's more sketchbooks, some multi-part pieces. He makes a sort of this very long thin bottle with sort of alternative stoppers. And there's one piece which is it's a sort of goblet, but it's decorated with kind of skulls and all that sort of, like carved stuff. And it has these little bits of sort of slightly kind of sinister, almost like jewellery that you can hang off it or sit inside it. And I've been told, we don't know who owns it, but I had an intriguing message from the dealer who's lending it saying that it belongs to Keith Richards. Now, I don't know if it may be Keith Richards in Peckham, but I like the idea it could be the Keith Richards. So the early work has this sort of amazing kind of diversity, and as I say, there are lots of plates with different sort of themes of landscape and identity, and some funny, some sort of more acerbic. But then as it progresses, the vase becomes more and more the dominant form that he uses. And he plays off its sort of associations as both a domestic object, but also something quite grand. And there's a whole series which are based on the kind of urns that you have ashes in. One of which actually says, these are the ashes of our Grace and Perry. So this is one he made when he just, I think he and his wife had just produced their daughter, and him thinking about how, having been screwed up by his parents, the risks attached to becoming a parent himself. So this is called childhood trauma manifesting itself in later life, which of course is kind of what all his work is about, how that childhood experience is sort of played out in who he has become, and he is working through that in a sort of pre-therapeutic way. And repeatedly he appears in some sort of guise, there's a lot of sort of self-representation, either literally in sort of exploring these sort of his new identity, or sort of sometimes metaphorically through animals and objects. And this is a great sort of circle, and a lot of them also play off kind of ideas of class and social mores, and particularly poke fun at the art world, as I say. So the cocktail party obviously looks at the sort of people who are wearing stylish Jean Paul Gaultier dresses with that sort of Madonna bra on there, very much of its time. So this is I should say, I suppose, we are hoping, touch wood, that this show is going to have a huge impact and really raise the profile of contemporary art at the Holborn. A few years ago we had the Bruegel show, which got a massive audience for us and got a lot of news profile. And I'm hoping Grayson might do the same. He's already, because he's going to be away in early January, he's already doing a lot of advanced press stuff. He's been filmed for the One show, which will go out on BBC One in the week of the opening. I'm hoping something awful happens that week, which is probably quite likely, that it will get on the 6 and 10 o'clock news on BBC One that night at the opening. And he's doing a number of sort of press interviews, so it'll have really a good national profile. Thames and Hudson are making a major book reproducing all of the works in the show, with contributions by Katrin, and by Grayson, and by Andrew Wilson, who's an expert on sort of British art in the 80s. So it should be, and they're really pushing that very hard. If you get their catalogue, it's the first thing in next year's Thames and Hudson catalogue. So I'm hoping this is a really big event. It's very exciting. It's quite challenging. When a lot of these works, but there are a number of these works which have some quite challenging imagery. As you might expect from what I'm saying, some of it is of a sexual nature. There's a certain amount of kind of domination and subordination that goes on, a bit of fetishism. There's also a small amount of kind of Nazi imagery. You might have noticed in one of those plates there's a sort of Nazi, this is the Luftwaffe insignia or something. This is a kind of post-punk period, which some of you will remember. There was that sort of phenomenon of people like Susie of Susie and the Banshees, and Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols wearing a swastika as a kind of, sticking a finger up to polite society, if you like. It's not a statement of a political position. But we have sort of, in making our selection, we've sort of deliberately sort of minimised that aspect of it, because we don't want it to detract from what the work's really about, which is not about that sort of politics. at all. I should have said actually that, as you may know, the process of this has been unusual in that when we first proposed this exhibition to Victoria Miro, and I didn't have any expectation that Grace would have any interest at all. She came out saying he's really excited because no one knows where these things are. All those early pots were lost, and he really wants to find them. And so we hatched this plan that we would sort of do a public call-out, which we did last year in the summer. I got an amazing response. We got like 150 or more responses from people saying, "Oh, I've got an early Grace, I've got an early Grace." Some of them were fake. One of them, he admitted, was by his brother. Yes, and then he went on TV and for something else, and then said, we're doing this exhibition, we've done this call out because in those days no one kept any records. And now James Birch, who's a kind of friend of mine whose gallery Grayson showed it in the 1980s, was very, very cross because he kept meticulous records. And he showed me these books where each work was listed, the buyer, their address, their phone number, the price, all of it was there. But the call out was such a fantastic sort of opportunity to announce the show in advance. It was well open, even if we could have found the pots and the people in a more conventional way. So that's the main show. That's going to occupy both spaces from January the 24th right through to, I think, the late May bank holiday. So that's a large chunk, and we hope to be very, very busy. But the summer is still, and then at the same time on the ballroom table, is a ceramic feast. As I can't remember if we've talked about this before, but we received on Monday, I think the largest collection of Bow porcelain in the country. Around 300 pieces have been transferred from Pallant House in Chichester to our collections and acquisitions, so they're now ours. So it's a sort of definitive collection of 18th century Bow porcelain, which will go on to the permanent display in the next few years. But in the short term, we're going to install them on the ballroom table during Grayson's show. But this is a sort of sample of Bow porcelain, so it's a mixture sort of some plates and vases and containers, and some figurative and animal figures, many whites. And we have a few pieces already upstairs in the Fletcher Gallery. But now, this is a huge collection. And we'll show the full range of what Bow porcelain could be in the 18th century. So part of the tradition that Grayson's sort of playing on as well. And then in the summer, we're going to have a show of Canaletto's paintings of Venice. It's a very specific set. Very topical. The water's up here, I think, at the moment. So this is Canaletto, major figure of the 17th century, really the major figure of the great sort of British Grand Tour. Canaletto's career really was built on the British desire for his views of Venice. And of course he came to Britain and painted British subjects, which was shown here a few years ago. I think 2015? This is a great opportunity because one of the great sets of Canaletto paintings is at Woburn Abbey, hung in their dining room. And they had not been shown they were commissioned by the Duke of Bedford in the 17th century from Canaletto. And there's correspondence about the commission and so on. They've never been shown as a set outside Woburn Abbey. But Woburn Abbey's just closed for the year to refurbish and rewire and so on. And so this is sort of unique opportunity to show the whole set of 24 paintings together. I've just been talking to the curator of Woburn Abbey, and even he's very excited about this, because they're stacked 3 high between windows, so no one has seen them close to, except unless you're up the step ladder. So to see them hung, on a line in a gallery setting is, there's an opportunity for everybody, even the Duke of Bedford. So we're doing that in the summer, and they're characteristic Canaletto's. I don't know how much you know about Canaletto, but he kind of had a catalogue. So I think you went to Canaletto's studio, you worked through an agent actually, you went to the base of Venice and said, well, I'd like a Doge's Palace, 2 Grand Canals, and Santa Maria Formosa, for example. So the set we have coming is a mixture of Grand Canal views and also then a range of different inland views, different squares, campos, campi, I suppose you call them. This is Santo Maria Formosa. And I'm very excited because I know Venice quite well. I've been there. We got married there years ago. At this time of year, actually, we're very lucky we didn't drown. So that's the main show in the summer in the Roper Gallery. And to coincide with that, we're hoping, this is a brilliant idea of Spencer's, to have a kind of Venetian garden out the back. And we'll have sort of themed menu in the cafe, and we'll somehow dress the garden so it feels, we're just flooded. Feels Venetian, and we'll have an Aperol spritz bar and a pizza oven and stuff, I hope. If anyone knows that we can find a gondola for a few months, that would be really helpful. I'm thinking there must be an opera company or someone who has a spare gondola we could put on the front lawn. We need red and white poles sort of down the front. So that's, I can't remember what comes in. Oh yes, so in the Worth at the same time, we've got this amazing collection, small collection, about 20 objects of metalwork. Medieval, mostly, Islamic, mostly metalwork, coming from the Courtauld collection. The Courtauld Institute is also closed at the moment. We're like sort of rag and bone men, just going around picking up people's collections as they don't need them. So this was offered to us by the Courtauld, and we thought it looked interesting, and of course we sort of, it's building on the work we did around the display of Miss Tanner's collection a year or two ago, which got such a great response and gave us great opportunities to work with, for example, Syrian refugees living in Bath. I didn't realise, so we agreed to do this show. This is the start piece, which is a sort of like a little handbag in metalwork from 14th century Mosul. And I mentioned it to someone who said, "Oh my God, but that is the great masterpiece of medieval metalwork." So this is really important stuff, and extraordinarily beautiful and beautifully crafted objects. And these are sort of the metal that's punched and sort of two metals laid silver on brass, I think, laid. And quite a neat sort of accompaniment to Canaletto. I'd like to say this is what follows in our minds. Because it's mostly 13th, 14th, 15th century Islamic from Iran, Iraq, southern Turkey. But there are one or two pieces which I think are actually slightly later in Venetian. But it's a reminder that Venice was, as John Ruskin said, Venice is where East meets West. It's that coming together, the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, of Christianity and the Islamic world. So it's actually quite a nice accompaniment to the Canaletto show. So that will be in the Worth during the summer. In the ballroom during the summer, I have an ambition to take the Perspex vitrine out. Because while I feel that we've done amazing things on the tabletop, I also think the Perspex box ruins what should be the most beautiful room in Bath, both visually and acoustically. And so what I'm hoping we'll manage to do, and we haven't quite worked out the logistics or the price, but is take the box apart, which is actually starting to look a bit tired and scratched, but maybe use the table for a while in some other way. And of course, without the box, the table, I think, is movable. I mean, it certainly can go in one dimension, but I think it's probably, with enough people, movable in another dimension. And ultimately, I'd like to have the room clear and have a more flexible sort of furniture. We can do all sorts of things. So we can still show silver and ceramics, whatever we like, or basic American broken ceramics. But we could also have a Rodin exhibition or Giacometti exhibition or whatever, sculpture on the floor. There will be people, I know there are people horrified by that prospect, who say, but we've done amazing things on the tabletop. And I think, yes, we have. And I think that if we'd never had the table, we would have done amazing things on the floor. So that is my ambition. But the first stage is to remove the box. And then we'll think of ways of using that room in the summer, possibly in a flexible way, so we can do a range of things in there. And then I'm still working on what we'll do there in the autumn. That's that. So talking of the autumn then, the Roper exhibition will be an exhibition of the early work of Thomas Lawrence. This is in ways the last piece of the jigsaw around the acquisition of the Arthur Atherley portrait that you all know well. when we acquired that work with funding from the Arts Fund and from the V&A and other places, we committed to making an exhibition around it. And so we're doing this exhibition of early Thomas Lawrence. So Lawrence, as I'm sure you know, is an artist born locally in Devizes, who was making a living in Bath as a portrait artist by the age of 12, I think. And then at the age of 20, went up to London, and by the age of 2021, he was a Royal Academician and painting Queen Charlotte, the Royal Commission. So this show is, I think he went up to London in 17. So this focuses on his development in Bath and then his first arrival in London. So it's very much about, an artist prodigy. It's a mixture of paintings and drawings. You know the drawings that we have had until recently in the Fletcher Gallery, which is extraordinarily beautiful. This is a self-portrait which has just recently re-emerged and returned to Britain from an American collection. It's fun, I didn't even know it was there. The Great and the Good, who will be coming to Bath. So this is a famous portrait of Georgiana Spencer, made in Bath, later the Duchess of Devonshire. She was the subject of a film starring Keira Knightley, which seemed very obviously to be sort of playing off the fact that she was Lady Diana's ancestor. So this is very typical of Lawrence's Bath style. This is 1782. And of course, Arthur Atherley, which is the study for a full-length painting that was shown at the Royal Academy in 1792, was the start piece at the Royal Academy in 1792. You know it well. And one of the key themes in this exhibition will be Lawrence's paintings of youth. So there's this is one of a number of paintings he made, or images he made of young men. He also painted young women, but particularly young men. And it's very interesting, and this came out of some of the work, I think, that was done around the acquisition, that here is a teenager painting teenagers, so reflecting on that moment. It's an extraordinarily beautiful painting, but I see it completely differently since Ken Loach came here earlier in the year to do a talk with George Shaw. We were looking around the picture gallery together, and he looked and said, reminds me of George Osborne. I don't think, not physically, but I think in a sense, what he saw was a sense of Etonian entitlement, I think. Anyway, sorry, I've ruined it for you. Don't know how things like that can play in Bath, do you? But so this is to show that the Atherley portrait is one of a number of beautiful young men that Lawrence painted at that time, and the two drawings we've just taken down are examples as well. So that will be a kind of focal point of the show, is that those sort of depictions of youthful beauty. And then in the Worth Gallery, to draw out that theme of adolescence and to balance the historic with the modern and contemporary, we're showing a video by Tracey Emin called Why I Never Became a Dancer, which is a sort of key work of the 1990s. It's a really sort of iconic piece in her development. And it's a combination of film of Margate, where she grew up, in the time that she was growing up there, using photographs and so on, and film, home movie film, with a voiceover from her of her teenage experiences, and how dancing became a sort of active defiance of the way she was sort of marginalised because of her sort of difference and stuff as a teenager in Margate. So I think there's a really nice potential there to draw, it's what the Holborn really ought to be about, bringing contemporary artistic practice and the art of the past together to show how both open up really sort of fundamental issues about our lives, growing up, and so on. And I think now there's an extra dimension to this work. It's sort of nearly 25 years old. That sort of seeing someone who's now in their 50s making work in their late 20s or something about their teenage experiences, it adds another layer to that sort of resonance. So that's it, I think. I think it's a really rich and diverse programme with a lot of exciting possibilities, a lot of things which are sort of familiar and absolutely, classic kind of Holborn things, and new departures with a kind of commitment and boldness that that I think will change people's perceptions of the Holborn and maybe a little bit of Bath, people sort of further afield. So I think it's a really, next year, 2020, is going to be a really crucial year for us in all sorts of ways. So I'm very excited about it. It's slightly odd, because I feel like I've been spending a lot of time recently working on the 2021 and 22 programme. So it's very difficult when you're trying to make shows like this with this ambition. And it's not, it's not always easy to persuade, an artist like Grayson Perry, that a place like the Holborn, which isn't an obvious sort of contemporary art space and doesn't have a huge gallery to offer, that it's, that it's an important place to work. So we're doing that with a variety of different projects. I've got some exciting things coming up in the next few years. You might have seen, because it was announced in the press last week, I think, that we've gone into a partnership with the National Portrait Gallery. Will be closed for 3 years from next year. And so I think in early 2022, the years sort of start to blur. In early 2022, we're going to have an exhibition of Tudor portraits upstairs from their collection. And their closure means that we'll be able to show things that you could never really have got out of London normally. So for those of you who are despairing at Tracy Emin's imminent arrival, she will be followed by Elizabeth I at some point. That's it. So are there any questions?
Can I just ask, the Islamic metal exhibition, do you consider to have some of Miss Tanner's collection?
Well, I think we should make sure it's out somewhere. As you may know, we're sort of just in the early stages of thinking about changes to the collection displays in the next few years, and what we do with that collection in particular, given that people's interest in it, is a sort of key question. I think the Courtauld exhibition itself is a sort of contained package, so we can't mix them up. And most of this kind of stuff, very little of it is actually very old. Yeah. No, they gave it to us. It was a transfer, legally transferred. Yeah. So it is ours forever.
Will all of the exhibitions be unique to the Holborn?
No. So the Courtauld exhibition is a package which is going elsewhere. I can't remember where. And the Grayson Perry exhibition we've originated. And we'll go to York Art Gallery after here, and then the Sainsbury Centre in Norwich after that. So it'll be on the road for a year, which is great news for us, because they pay the need to share all the costs, and they give us a fee for making it. So yes, I hope it may be the cheapest show of the year and the most income generating. Fingers crossed. Yeah. No. Right. You were right, there's murmuring going on. Yes, completely. And I think, interestingly, as we've been sort of talking about our identity and how we're perceived, I found a lot of people externally saying the same thing. That one of the things that's odd about our position, and maybe how we now talk about ourselves, is that with the Holborn Museum, it doesn't, by not mentioning art in our name, it doesn't distinguish us from the other 17 museums in
Can we legally change it?
Yeah, I think we did before. We used to be, until 2011, we were the Holborn Mint Street Museum of Art. You can see how a branding agency calls it. So yes, I think. I'm never quite sure what the distinction between gallery and an art museum is, really. But I don't think we should. I don't think we should do it for a gallery, didn't we? Anything else? Grayson is coming for the opening. Such is his itinerary, we already know that he's coming Wednesday afternoon. Going back to Friday morning. So he'll be here for the press view on the Thursday morning. And we're keeping a slot free for him to do broadcast interviews. So we'll go and put interviews and then the local music and we'll do it. Yeah, then we give him a couple of hours to get changed, I think, for the evening. And then he's coming back on the 1st of April to give a talk, which I think is going to be at the new Bar Spa Locksbrook campus. Because last time he gave, I think when he was at Victoria, he came and gave a talk and sold out so quickly they had to move it to December. So we were looking at different venues and Bar Spa said, well, why didn't you do it in our new building? And you know, we're very sort of closely tied with Bar Spa, so it's not most of the vacation, but it's a great opportunity to be able to go. And good to see him dialogue.
Are we still going to be selling tickets to the acts or will the next period through?
No, they all go to us. So they're just providing the space. And I hope you'll do a book signing as well at the same time. Unnecessarily. Sun's long over the yard arm. Thank you, everybody. I mean, obviously, if you do have questions, then you know where to find me or Sylvie, or for the next few weeks, Patrick. So do bother us with anything you want to know more about, or if you want to want some tips on where to look up information on the artists, then do that too. All right, thank you very much. They won't say. There'll be those, thank you.
They're almost secondary. They're kind of like an artifact. A bigger picture, which is
It's only the road, so yeah.
his interest, and therefore
It's lovely coming down.
Suzanne would be here, I don't know. I don't see. George was referencing his. Yes,
Yes, I'll be there.
there's nothing specific about that exhibition.
But construction is literally issues.
I met Grace Harris, and I met really the other day, just by chance, she was doing the whole one, and I went to study with some other people, and these people came out of the school, and I said, oh, who's been in there? And they said, like, Philip Perry, and I thought he was cute, and I said, this is good. Your book, could you sign my autograph for me? He went, yeah.
She's quite attractive herself. She's like a cartoon. She's like a cartoon character. Right. It did amuse me, because if there's one name that comes up whenever I have a conversation about trying to skew around to contemporary, talk about contemporary art, the name that generally comes on people's lips is certainly Mrs. Evan. So that's what I laughed. I did laugh when it came up. I thought, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Here's an opportunity. Here's an opportunity to do some educating no, I
That's all.
yeah.
How they reinvented that?
No idea.
You've got no idea about anything.
Not really, no.